And he tells me that's not the case. But I'm obviously prepared to put that in the book as well. And what I'm particularly concerned that I've been told by this member of Class 4 is that he ran off with some of the Class 4's money, which of course would be a criminal offence and an attempt by the state to undermine protest in this country. And again, I'm listening. I'll put that in an updated version of the book because it's fundamentally wrong. And we've talked about agent provocateur in the book elsewhere. And we've tried to expose them where we can, but we are limited by what we know. To a certain extent, the intelligence services work on the principle of need to know, and MI5 is not particularly strict, but I can only talk about what people have told me or what I've seen for myself. In the case of Melita Norwood, if you read the full article, I actually didn't call for a prosecution in the end. I said that because she had confessed without being read her rights, that we had no right to prosecute. That information could not be used against her. What I was saying in that article is that we should not simply be lenient on somebody because they are 87, but the law should no longer apply to them. The law should apply to people equally. And again, I question the wisdom of people who give away our defence secrets to an enemy power like the Soviet Union, that has been known to be so repressive and to be responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of political dissidents. In the case of Richard Tomlinson, the reason I thought he was unreliable, and I have to say this, I thought at one point he was still working for the services. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was living in France, just after I'd been released from prison, he invited me to go to Libya with him to do an interview. It was going to be an interview filmed by Al Jazeera, and we were going to sit there having tea with Gaddafi, and we were going to discuss geopolitics. It sounded like a crazy idea. And Tomlinson said, Al Jazeera will pay you $1 million for this. Now, of course, at the time, my prospects weren't good. My ears pricked up. Who wouldn't have a prospect of $1 million? But I made some inquiries about it. It turned out that Al Jazeera knew nothing about this. It turned out the Libyans knew nothing about this. So I thought he was acting as some kind of agent provocateur to get me to Libya, where I could be arrested and tortured by the Libyans. I wasn't at the time best pleased with Richard Tomlinson. I read his book, and certain aspects of his book I do think are bullshit. I don't think he took a Petrochin archive out of the Soviet Union. I know from the inside that he failed his 2-year probation. In fact, the reason he was kicked out of the service was because he never passed his probation period in the 4 years he was there. So I doubt they were giving him top-level operations like smuggling a Petrochin archive out of the former Soviet Union. That said, though, about the Did Princess Diana issue, I haven't been following particularly closely, I have to admit. When I first made those comments many years ago, it was before, in some case, the information had emerged. We didn't know about the cars being switched at the last minute. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Mohammed Al-Fayed's people who had been investigating the case, so I didn't know chapter and verse. When I began to look through the chapter and verse, I began to realise that the evidence pointed very strongly to MI6 involvement, and that is why that is recorded in the book. And I do think Richard Tomlinson does not make a fuss about him speaking out in public interest. Quite often the tone of his disclosures has been, I work for MI6, aren't I clever? And of course we need, or I think we need, an act of parliament that does defend genuine secrets. We cannot have intelligence officers simply giving secrets to our enemy for no good reason. But of course that secret sense legislation should not stop whistleblowers like myself trying to expose MI6 paying our terrorist enemies to try and assassinate a foreign head of state and killing innocent people. In that case, of course, it would be very easy to walk away and turn a blind eye. If I was still working with the services, I don't understand why I want to put out misinformation like that. It's misinformation. There's nothing to be gained from saying innocent Libyans died. It's not that the national press is going to be up in arms about it. But I said that because I have a fundamental belief in human life. And I believe that to think that one life can be discarded as collateral damage in a terrorist attack by MI6 is wrong. That is the beginning of tyranny, the beginning of totalitarianism. And I have included Richard Tomlinson's information where he is sworn to a judge, and I point all that out. And I've added my own information, as I said, about the Princess Diana issue. So I've tried to give as fair a picture of that as I possibly can. But I couldn't know about information before it came out, obviously. In the case of the Sean McNulty thing, yes, I used that. I used it because There were two reasons why I spoke out about the services. One was the abuse of civil liberties. The second, of course, was that they couldn't actually do their jobs. They couldn't actually stop terrorist attacks. And there were 4 occasions when I was in the service in which attacks happened, and MI5 was in possession of prior information and due to bureaucratic inertia failed to react. I think you have a right to know that. So I'm saying it, and I stand up to say it. The issue with Hayes and Taylor, I didn't realise the footage had been suppressed for however many days it was. I can't follow everything in the media. But I would point out that it was a matter for SO13. It was a post-instance investigation. It wasn't an intelligence operation conducted by MI5 against Hayes and Taylor. Therefore, MI5 would not be responsible. I stress, post-incident evidence investigations are done by SO13, the anti-terrorist one, not by MI5. And again, I stress that I spoke out about the Israeli embassy bombing to say that information had been withheld by MI5. But when I did so, I was attacked by the government and attacked by the right-wing press. I stood my ground, and 3 years later they got an appeal, and the government had to admit this document existed. They also had to admit that 8 people had failed to disclose that document to the trial judge. That should have been a mistrial. Their convictions should have been quashed. I spent a week in Scotland going around campaigning on behalf of the 2 of them with the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. And I continue to campaign for their release from prison, along with their sister Randa Alami. With the SWP, I'm afraid I don't know the names of the assets in the SWP. Without saying too much, because I might finish up back in prison, but somebody speaking to me tonight knows that I'm prepared to nod my head at the right moment when names are mentioned to me, where I do know those names. And can I just stress as well about class war, is that I didn't think class war posed a threat to the state. I actually closed down the coverage of class war. I did what is known as terminating the agents. That is, dismissing them, not putting them all at the back of the heads, of course.
That's a shame.
So I actually stopped class war and their members from being reported on by the secret state, because I could see that there was no point in doing that, and it was a waste of everybody's time and effort. I defend monitoring terrorists who put bombs down on the streets. When I was in MI5, 2 young boys in Warrington died as a result of an IRA bomb. That was what we couldn't stop, but we stopped many others. In spite of, not because of management. I'm proud to say that we did that. Yes, we tapped their phones, but on the basis of a good intelligence case, on the basis that these people were putting bombs down and endangering human life. So I'll stand up and say, yes, they did that, and I'm proud of it. Where that has happened and that has not been justified, in the case of Victoria Britton, the Guardian journalist, I have stood up and said that. I have exposed how MI5 wanted to arrest her daughter on trumped-up charges. And I know that the services in Brief and Telegraph will say that I started that operation. And it's simply untrue, that I did not start that operation, and when I took it over, I did everything in my power to stop that operation, including at one point actually phoning a journalist friend of mine and saying to him, look, if this carries on any longer, I want you to write an article about it, because I can't stop it internally, but at least if you write an article, she will then know about it, the operation will have to come to an end. That I didn't actually appear in the end because the operation was finished a few weeks afterwards by MI5. That is how far I was prepared to go, and that was before I went on the record. The case of Roger Windsor, I don't believe Roger Windsor was an MI5 agent. I've seen how MI5 agents behave, and Roger Windsor approached me and asked me to confirm this. I never spoke to Rupert Allison about it, so God knows what he was talking about.